Hello, everyone. Let's discuss this question from May-June 2023, variant 1-2. This is question number 2, and question number 2 is on research methodology. And we do not have any choice for the questions that we have in section A, and question 2 is again from section A. Now, if you have a look at the question over here, the question reads, explain 2 ways the values of the sociologist may lead to bias in research findings. Understand the question. Explain 2 ways that the values of the sociologist may lead to bias in research findings. What are the 2 ways in which the values, the opinions, the biasness that a sociologist carries might end up leading to biasness in the findings of the research? Now, taking this ahead, if we speak about indicative content, number 1, the way a research is conducted, right? The conduct of a research, for example, interviewer bias. Now, the way you're conducting a research, interviewer bias. For this, we need to know what the word interviewer bias over here means. Interviewer bias, or when there's biasness coming from the interviewer, could be intentional, could be unintentional too. So the responses of an interviewer may influence the interviewee, forming a close attachment with the sample, or otherwise could be the other way around as well. So when an interviewer is conducting an interview, remember, an interviewer is the person who's conducting an interview, and interviewee is the respondent, right? Interviewee is the respondent. So the responses that the interviewer gives to the interviewee, it could be verbal means of communication, or could be non-verbal means of communication too. For instance, your body language, your gestures, your eye contact, the demeanor you're carrying, right? So conduct of research, interviewer bias, the response of an interviewer may influence the interviewee. 1. Number 2, another piece of indicative content, the collection of data. How is it that the researcher is collecting data, right? Now, the construction of questions in an interview. Now, there's a possibility, before, especially if you talk about a structured interview or a semi-structured interview. For a structured interview, the researcher collects or has a list of all the questions that he or she plans on using for data collection, right? Now, construction of those questions, for instance, let's just say if I am to conduct an interview, if I have to conduct an interview, there's a possibility, let's just say I have around 20 questions in my mind, but I know I would want to restrict my interview to 10 questions only, right? So those 10 questions that I choose would of course reflect my values. Now, through this example that I just gave you, the questions that I'm choosing to interview, the questions that I'm choosing to be used in my interview would of course be a reflection of my values. The questions that I thought were important would be of course a part of the interview. The way they're constructed, the way they phrase, the way they worded, again could include my values, which consequently might lead to the findings of the research maybe being biased. Now, the third point, the choice of research topic. Sympathy for the poor may lead to an interest in researching poverty and the way research is conducted. Again, the choice of a research topic. Now, there are infinite amount of topics that a researcher could conduct a research on, right? Now, out of those countless topics that you have, if a researcher chooses to collect data or chooses to conduct a research on a particular topic, that again is a reflection of the researcher's values. I mean, he or she could have picked up any other topic, and why this particular topic or whatever the topic is that the researcher chooses to conduct his or her research on, right? So the topic that has been chosen to conduct a research on, again, is a reflection of the researcher's values, again reflects the biasness that the researcher has towards that particular research topic. Now, a researcher, let's say, would choose a topic because he or she finds that particular topic more interesting or more relevant or more significant as compared to the rest. Now, the next point, processing of data. When you've collected data, then you process it. Data might as well require interpretation. The way you're processing that data would include the way you're interpreting it or giving meaning to it, or the way you're presenting that particular piece of information. So processing of data is another way through that reflects the values of a researcher. Interpretation and presentation of findings may be influenced by the beliefs of the researcher, right? Now, I might interpret data according to the belief system I hold, right? Now, The next, okay, so there is a sociological reference to this as well. If you can think of a sociologist. Let me give you and give you a hint, give you a hint over here. Howard Becker, right? If you know of this, well and good. If not, there's rather I'd include the link of that particular video to this in the description box over here. And there's this video that very comprehensively explains this particular topic, values. And yes, you can get a 26-mark question on values too. So just in case, if you want to know more about Becker or values, I'd put the link in the description box. So processing of data, interpretation and presentation of findings may be influenced by the beliefs of the researchers, research and position, right? The next one, oh sorry, this one, the video that I'm talking about, it would fit well into for this particular point. Now moving on, sociologists may sometimes be influenced by the common sense ideas of the time, and this may have a distorting influence on the research. Again, when a sociologist is conducting a research, the more popular beliefs that people hold or the paradigms people follow at a particular time period, they might influence the research process as well as the findings of the research too. This again, this reference that we have of Thomas Kuhn, we usually teach this, or this comes under the heading of the topic, the usage of natural science methods in sociological research. I'd put the link of that a video I'd put a link of a video for that particular topic in the description box too, just in case if you haven't covered the topic, the usage of natural science methods in sociology. Now, the next point, sociologists' belief about how research should be approached. Now, sociologists' belief again matters too. For instance, if you're talking about a positivist would be more inclined towards collecting data through quantitative means. However, I'm sorry, however, if you speak about an interpretivist would be more inclined towards collecting data through qualitative methods, right? So that could possibly be a part of your answer as well. Now, let me read through the question again, just in case if you've lost track. The question over here says, explain two ways the values of the sociologist may lead to bias in research findings. Any two ways, you need to explain them, of course, through which you think the values of the sociologist may lead to biases in the findings of the research. Having a look at the criteria real quick. So you get the first mark for making a point, you get the second mark for explaining the point, you get the third mark for relevant sociological material, you get the fourth mark for explaining how that relevant sociological material is, how relevant that sociological material is to the point that you've made. Now, an example that the examiner has provided is the responses of an interviewer may influence the interviewee. The verbal or the non-verbal reactions of the interviewer may influence the answers given. This might result in interviewer biasness. This may lead interviews to provide answers that coincide with what they perceive as researchers' values. For students who've studied psychology, a hint that I could give you here is demand characteristics. Now, what is demand characteristics for the ones who do not know? When the respondent, or in this case, the interviewee that we're talking about, since this example is related to an interview, when the respondents find out what the demand of the research is, when the respondents find out what the demands of the research is, they might end up acting accordingly. So hence the word demand characteristics. Quickly moving on to the next question. The next question over here reads, explain two strengths of using a covert approach to participant observation. Remember, now, this question is from May, June 2023. In October, November 2023, there was a question that read, explain two, I think it was strengths or limitations, but it had to do with overt approach. Now, this one has to do with covert approach. Now, the two strengths of using a covert approach to participant observation. Covert comes from the word cover, cover means hidden. Covert participant observation. What is covert participant observation over here? Or rather, what is covert observation over here? Covert observation is an observation when the identity of the researcher is kept hidden, or in other words, when the people who are being studied do not know that they're being studied, right? Now, it is unethical. Yeah, it is unethical, but it is the way it is. Explain two strengths of using a covert approach to participant observation. Number one, avoids the Hawthorne effect to the extent that the researcher is incognito. Now, Hawthorne effect, if you have business, you'd know about the Hawthorne effect. If you do not have business, I just walk you through this Hawthorne effect, or this is the term that we typically we typically use when you talk about a situation when participants get to know that a research is being conducted on them, which consequently results in them changing their behavior, right? So if it is a if it's a covert participant observation, the participants or the people who are being observed wouldn't know that they're being observed. If they wouldn't know they're being observed, they wouldn't change their behavior, or in other words, they'd end up behaving normally or naturally, which of course adds on to the validity of the research. Number two, ability to study groups that wouldn't otherwise give access to. Now, there are certain deviant groups which might not allow you to conduct a research on them. There are many criminal groups which might not allow you to conduct a research on them. And in those cases, then the only option that you're left with is uh, conducting a covert observation, or you conducting a research on them, or you observing them without them getting to know about it. Now, the third point, the ability to participate in activities that may otherwise be denied to an overt research. Example, certain dangerous activities, that is access to information that is unavailable by any other means. Now, there are certain cases when you might not be allowed to conduct a research, or there are certain cases that are considered to be dangerous for which you might not be given permission to. You could use a covert observation in that case too. Moving on real quick as to how the examiner marks the 6 mark question. The first mark for identifying a strength, the second mark for explaining why this method has this strength, the third mark for explaining why it is a strength. Avoids Hawthorne effect because the participants do not know they are because the participants do not know you are researching them, they're less likely to change their behavior. This increases the validity of the data. See, it's that simple to score a 6 on 6. Now, I hope this has helped. Thank you.